Greetings and salutations, and welcome to the new episode of Dakota Boys Talk Movies. We're going to be talking an oldie today, but it's still going to be slightly inspired by a new movie that's coming out because Rebel Moon Part 2 is going to be hitting, not the theaters, but hitting your TV screen soon. And if any of you watch the first one, it's essentially a very long chapter one of a book, and you go, I feel like I've seen this before. And it's because you have. Because today we're going to talk about the movie that really inspired not only Rebel Moon, but honestly kind of became the blueprint for a lot of movies going forward in a lot of ways. In a lot of different ways, but story for sure.
The movie that sent 1,000 copycats to so many screens.
It really did. It really did. And what's funny about it, well, here, I'll list a few. We're talking about Seven Samurai. Is what we're talking about today from 1954. The most expensive movie Japan had ever made at that point. And the longest movie of Akira Kurosawa's career. And it also was made the same year as Godzilla, which is kind of crazy. That was quite a year for Japan. So
I keep forgetting that it was so far back because what year was Magnificent Seven?
Magnificent Seven, I have that here, 1960. So Magnificent Seven was 6 years after Seven Samurai, because Seven Samurai was 1954.
Because, every time you hear the people talk about those two movies, it's like Seven Samurai came out, and then immediately Hollywood was like,
yeah,
make that, but Old West.
I mean, sure, except that the way the story goes is that the director of Magnificent Seven, actually, it was his idea to take it and make it into the Old West. The irony of this whole thing is it's the cyclical nature of inspiration, where it's like Akira Kurosawa was very like the director he looked up to more than anyone was John Ford. John Ford, who was known for directing some of the most groundbreaking American westerns, starting with Stagecoach in 1939. So you have Akira Kurosawa going, I want to make movies like John Ford, but with my culture. And then you have people like John Sturges, who directed Magnificent Seven, looking at Seven Samurai and going, I want to take that and make it into a Western, which is what Kurosawa was doing. He was essentially taking an idea of a Western and putting it into samurai culture of the feudal Japan period. And it's just like round and round we go with these inspirations. And it's kind of interesting because at the same time, this is where you see that it really is inspiration. And this is where I think we can get into an interesting conversation too, Dakota. Inspiration and not just straight up copycat. Because there are differences between Magnificent Seven and Seven Samurai to a degree. Obviously the scaffolding of it, the framework is similar, but what ends up happening a lot of times is, like with Rebel Moon per se, is it's like they don't do any. They think they're doing something fresh. Someone like Zack Snyder thinks they're doing something fresh, but it just feels like day old bread in kind of one sense, because there's I'm taking elements of this and I'm making something new, and it's like, well, you are, but I'm not feeling the point or the purpose. It just, I don't know. It's like, Dakota, I don't know what I'm getting at. Maybe it's just like a lot of nihilism in the world now. I just feel like everybody's just nihilists now, where it's like they think they're inspired, but it just feels like it's kind of hollow at the end of the day. Whereas I would say, we'll talk more about Seven Samurai here, but that is not a hollow movie.
So we're gonna get real nerdy right off the bat.
Do it. I want it. We want the nerdy. That's what we're here for.
So one of my favorite comic book storylines, written by Jeff Johns, failed movie maker, by the way, which feels weird to say. Such a good writer. This guy was like the right-hand man of Richard Donner once upon a time. Couldn't hack it in the world of Hollywood. Apparently he's not allowed in the Warner Brothers executive offices anymore.
Dakota, just because you and I, we both have a very strong appreciation for things that Jeff John has written in comic book form. So I think maybe we should say is Hollywood couldn't handle him.
Oh, okay.
Let's just put it that way.
All right.
Let's give him the benefit of the
doubt. There you go. But so he wrote a comic called Blackest Night, and in this, there's You don't find out about until the end of the story, but there's this force, and it's kind of moving things, and he works through this guy named Black Hand, which that dude is so messed up. I'm not even going to go into his backstory. But
is he human? I guess I don't know this stuff as well.
yeah, he's human. He was just a schmo. The
Schmo.
his family are a bunch of undertakers, but he's the black sheep.
Okay.
Yeah, he's the black sheep of the family. But so this process gets started of where these black rings are literally flying around the universe, and they're resurrecting dead villains, and I suppose sometimes they resurrect heroes too. But here's the thing: it's not like they themselves are being reanimated, because it's the force behind Black Hand that's animating him. So
Okay.
I brought this up. Conduit, very very minor Superman villain, gets resurrected, but he's not like, "Hey man, I'm back. You thought I was down, but you can't keep me down."
Oh, he went gangster.
Yeah. There was none of that. It's just they were being resurrected. Like the ring was taking over, and this force, which anyone interested in reading this, I suggest you do. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but this force, it's a person, a thing, whatever you want to call it. Some would even say non-binary. Interestingly enough, I don't know if he identifies as male or female, but I just said him. Anyway, I feel like that's how things are. Like they're taking these things that were created, or whether superficially or someone had like a thought, like, wouldn't that be cool? They're taking these things and they're using the dead husk to kind of make their will into reality.
Kinda.
And that's exactly why I will not watch Rebel Moon, because Zack Snyder, he took I don't want to say dead, because this film is, I don't think this film's dead. I think Seven Samurai is a great film. People, if you haven't seen it, give it a shot.
Yeah.
But they're taking the husk of this thing, and they're just imposing their own self onto it to basically enact their will. And that's how, like I said, it's just, I knew this was probably happening the moment I saw that trailer. I'm like, he's taking things that he thought looked cool. And I mean, we had been through this before with Zack Snyder.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like, he's kind of one of those, like, this is going to sound really mean, but it's kind of like the whole, even a broken clock is right twice a day idea, where it's like every once in a while, there'll be this spark of like something, and you do kind of get excited, because he's kind of one of those people where, like, when it hits, it hits, but boy, when it doesn't, it's a mess, Yeah. And that's the hard thing. And that's the thing, it's like, yeah, he's not that's the interesting thing about this, is you're not beating a dead horse. It's like you're accidentally killing that horse. Or maybe on purpose you're killing, because what happens is I think for years, so I just saw this movie more recently, and it blew my mind how good it was. And how, like, you're still in this movie, I should say, it's 3.5 hours long. And I don't think there's barely a movie out there that should be this long. It should not be the normal. There's some movies now that I look at what the movie's about, and I see the runtime says 2 hours and 15 minutes, and I'm just like, yeah, they probably could have shaved a half hour off that, And this is before me even watching it, just because it's like, But this movie deserved all of that time, used it well. Kurosawa set up this wonderful world, and these you had time to live with these characters, so that when everything started really taking off, you felt it. You felt it all, and you understood it all, and you saw their motivations, their lack of motivation even at times. And the disservice, though, is that this movie was so good I think happened for me was over the years you have, this is a Seven Samurai movie. This is a Seven Samurai movie. A Seven Samurai movie. And so it kind of was like, well, I never need to watch Seven Samurai. Apparently, I've seen it 25 times or something. And then you realize that most of those Seven Samurai, air quotes, movies are really just mere shadows of Seven Samurai. And even the good ones, because there are some good ones. Obviously, the most famous one being Magnificent Seven, which was made only 6 years after Seven Samurai. And but you have other ones that took from it, even all the way to A Bug's Life. Having a certain Seven Samurai, or even like different Star Wars episodes. There's some Clone Wars episodes that kind of have that Seven Samurai, or Mandalorian, where it's like you're coming in and you're helping this village be saved from these bandits type idea, and all of that kind of comes from the same vein. Or even Galaxy Quest and Three Amigos, in the comedy realm. But so if you've never seen this movie, it takes place in essentially what they call feudal Japan, so kind of in that same time period, as maybe similar to, like, since there's a big show on right now, what's that show called, Shogun?
Yeah,
it's in that same kind of relative time period, that feudal Japan, and in this time of the samurai, where there's still these samurai, and samurais are something that I don't know a lot about. They kind of do a way of explaining them in this movie, but it sounds like they're samurai. Like when you're an actual samurai, it's because you have a leader that you follow, and then there's other ones that are leaderless that are called ronin.
Yes,
and those ones are like considered like less honorable because they're leaderless.
Yeah, Game of Thrones fans would probably could probably relate to that, because occasionally in the books shows. Which there's a lot of, I keep forgetting there's a lot of books. There's more than just the chronological books, but there's these things called hedge knights. Basically, they go where the action is.
Oh, sure. Okay.
They don't have a lord. They kind of they got their knighthood and they're like, hey, I'm gonna go do my own thing.
Yeah.
And they're kind of seen as like scoundrels, like their honor's low, but I don't think there's that same association with Ronin.
Sure.
Yeah, but it's interesting because supposedly, and this is always a rumor I had heard. We kind of grew up in this interesting time frame, you and me did, where the internet was being more widely used to kind of circulate knowledge, and then of course, you get to like entertainment rumors. But supposedly there was George Lucas had always had this idea of doing something like the Seven Samurai. It would have taken place after Order 66.
Oh, okay.
But it was basically going to be seven Jedi essentially.
Sure.
And it's a shame that I had always thought that would have been cool. Like maybe not necessarily him, but having someone else come in and just kind of originate this idea. This tiny little planet's getting pushed around by the Imperials, and they send someone out to go try to find help to defend the planet, which essentially is kind of what Rebel Moon is. It's just that mixed with Suicide Squad, because I get the feeling these aren't the best characters,
right?
Like they're not the most upstanding people.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Let's get it. So, kind of the setup plot for Seven Samurai is there's this village, and they're an agricultural village. They're already not very well off because they're just lowly farmers in this kind of out in the middle of nowhere place. So what we'd call like podunk. Maybe even, very simple-minded, simple living, all of those things. And there's this group of, for lack of a better term, bandits that come basically just saying, I mean, you guys know this story because, like I said, it gets used so much. that are basically taking most of their stuff, and they're having to give all of their, essentially most of their rice, if not all, to these bandits, and they're living off of just the scraps of whatever else kind of grains and stuff they can come up with to live by. And the issue is that everyone in the village is essentially cowardly. They're too sheepish. They feel too weak. They don't have the abilities to even stand up to these people. They don't know what to do, and they're kind of at this point where it's like, we're gonna die. These bandits aren't going to maybe straight up physically kill us, but we're starving to death. Something's got to give, and so a few of them head off to find people to help them. There's an elder in the village that says, I can't remember if he tells them they need 7 warriors or if he tells them they need 10 warriors. I don't know. The elder in the village kind of gives us the number he thinks that they need, and they go off to try to find someone, and that's where we're introduced to the first one. And like I said, these are like Ronins. These are more like the leaderless ones, and so the ones they're already finding and seeing are already like, some of them are already kind of, their moral code is kind of off. Like they get when they go and try to get some of these samurai to help them, they get kicked around a lot. These guys don't care. Well, they finally see this one in action. They see him getting his head shaved. And they're like, what's going on? And this is the first kind of real Ronin / samurai we're introduced to. He's getting his head shaved, and you realize he's having his head shaved so that he can basically deceive this guy who's holding this kid captive inside a tent. And he gets his way in there. I think the head shaving makes this guy think he's maybe even like a Buddhist priest. And he just straight up just saves that kid but kills that guy. Like, they just see this guy in action, and they're like, maybe this is the guy we need to talk to. He seemed like he knew how to handle that situation, kept the kid safe, and killed that guy in like 0.3 seconds. And so they approach him. Well, it kind of ends up being that they finally found the guy they needed, the Yul Brenner, to go to Magnificent Seven. They found the guy who has a moral code, who is able to just help them maybe find some other samurai. And that's what you do. You see the whole team up of bringing them together. And so really that's the first hour of the movie. It's kind of getting the band together. The first hour, not 2.5 hours like certain Rebel Moon movies, but you spend time kind of getting this group together. And it's interesting because you see that they all have different brokenness to them. And one of them is even kind of animalistic. He's a guy who shows up in a lot of Kurosawa movies. In fact, I think he's the guy who's in like most Kurosawa movies. And he kind of has this almost like animalistic nature. He only carries one sword, a long sword, whereas a lot of the samurai have a short sword and a long sword. I think the short sword is for when they kill themselves, right, Dakota?
Well, I'm pretty sure it's for like self-defense. I don't think that's...
Well, I think the whole idea, though, is that's the honor of it, is like...
Yeah.
So that you have a shorter sword so you can kill yourself. And so I think kind of the setup is the fact that he only has his long sword kind of tells you that, like, maybe he doesn't quite have as much honor, where he's not thinking about when he has to slit his own belly open. Because, holy cow, if you watch any samurai thing, they're always cutting their own bellies open. It's kind of their thing.
Yeah, I mean, it was explained to me. I'm trying to remember what the word is. Seppuku, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to say it, but that's pretty much roughly what it is.
That's roughly my translation, but it's basically when you have failed just so utterly and miserably at your job, you were kind of expected to basically end your own life.
But sometimes it's like, imagine you're at work one day, and they're like, your till is we understand your till is going to be a few dollars short, but today your till was $25 short. That is too much, and because I feel like sometimes they're just cutting their bellies open just because they just do something a little wrong, and their leader's like, you've shamed my place, and so it's like, what I'm saying is like that culture, it's very intense. The honor is very intense. Like scary intense is what I'm getting at, which kind of really helps you understand, I think, World War II, honestly, where they were trying to carry over some of those ideas into the modern world, with how they operated during World War II. But and that's kind of what I think Kurosawa was maybe kind of getting at in this movie is like death. Like, what is honor? What is an honorable death? What is a noble thing to do? And then I think sadly, what you kind of see through some of Kurosawa's movies is that this was probably one of his more optimistic movies. He kind of had a less optimistic time period where he went through a lot of dark things and then kind of got a little more optimistic again. But and even though this movie's optimistic to a degree, it's still like heavy. I think that's what I was most surprised by was how when you think about the 1950s, you don't think about heavy violence, I guess. And this movie isn't even like violent in the traditional sense of like now what we can see in a lot of different even just TV shows now. But it still has a very heavy violent factor to it.
Yeah, I feel like people who are kind of fans of a lot of I know this doesn't fit into martial arts movies. They kind of look back on things and they're like, in their mind, it was way more violent than what it actually was. And I feel like that's why Quentin Tarantino, why Kill Bill is so just. It's like I don't just have to match it. I have to like beat it,
ramp it up.
Yeah. So I'm trying to remember what the name of that Japanese film was where. They had an effect and someone had gotten stabbed and the guy was supposed to like pull the sword out. Well, the effect went wrong and like this fountain basically exploded. And ever since then, people are like, it's got to be bigger. Blood splatter's got to be bigger.
That's what I'm telling you. So I'll just let you in on a conversation we had before we were recording here. I watched Kurosawa's basically what's considered his last epic, Ran, which he did in 1985, and it's basically a feudal Japan version of King Lear. And I don't know if this is the movie it is. I don't know if it's Kurosawa, but there's an off-camera sword hit, but then the entirety of the wall behind that character just gets like almost hilariously slashed with blood. But I also wondered if he did that on purpose because he wanted you to just take in just the offense of that kill too. And so it's like that, and that's always what's hard is when you have these directors who are always doing stylistic choices, you don't know what's a stylistic choice and what could have been a blooper that stayed in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and also that movie was in color because it was in 1985, and I think he was having fun playing with color a little bit too. Everything was very colorful in that movie, and of course, we all know blood is a very bright color. Although the shade of red in that movie is a little off from normal blood, but anyway, when I think about Seven Samurai, that was the thing that really hit me was when we get to the point where the samurai are taking on the bandits, it felt so visceral. And it wasn't just a constant bombardment of quick cuts. It was like wave after wave of attack. But the other thing that was getting me was, I was like, how did nobody die making this movie? There were like the way guys were falling off of horses, and it looked like other horses were trampling them. It's like, how did they do this safely? And I also get it was a different time period. Maybe they couldn't have done some of that now or in America. But it was still boggling just how visceral all of that felt and how you just felt the stakes so much that by that point, because not only at that point are you like all in on them wanting to help these people, and also you see them starting to redeem themselves in different ways, and then as time goes on and you start losing some start getting killed. It's just I'm speechless. I guess because I was just like, this movie. I'm watching it here in the year 2024, and it was just as effective. Even though it was black and white, and that's why if you're someone who won't watch a movie because it's in black and white, or the only black and white movies you've seen are when a modern day director has made their movie black and white for artistic purposes. Give the older movies a shot. Sometimes there's some movies out there I think people are really missing out on, and we're all just sitting here watching the junk food of today and missing out on the real treats of yesteryear. So, and it's foreign. And that's another thing, is don't be afraid of foreign movies. I took my son to a foreign movie, and the first thing he asked me when we were going to it, he goes, "Is this going to be in, like, do they have he didn't know the word dubbed, but that's essentially what it is this dubbed?" And I was like, "No." But I reassured him. I was like, a few minutes in, you're not even going to think about it. And sure enough, you don't. And so I know maybe you've tried and you think that, but when it's an engaging movie, you kind of get past the subtitles too. Dakota, how are you with subtitles in foreign film?
Oh, honestly, I prefer subtitles over dubs.
Oh, yes. Dubs are more distracting.
Yeah. Something that recently got brought up, I was having a conversation with a coworker, but I had asked them because it's not a Mad Max film, but another movie's set in that universe is coming out soon. I was like, "Hey man, did you ever see the dubbed version of the original Mad Max?" And he thought I was insane. I was like, "It looks terrible. It sounds even worse." Because
like the actual original Mad Max,
yeah,
not the Road Warrior.
I mean, it took place. It's an Australian film. But apparently, people in America at the time, Hollywood people, thought no one's going to take this movie seriously with these people with accents. So they dubbed the film.
That's crazy.
This is a film where people are speaking English, and they dubbed it, and it's terrible.
That's crazy.
And it's pain. It's not just painful to listen to; it's painful to watch.
Did Mel Gibson do his own American accent?
No, they didn't.
Oh no, that's hilarious.
But yeah, and it's one of those examples of, and I know especially Japanese, like when you're dubbing Japanese, I don't know what's going on, but like the American version will be like, "Oh, hey, look at that over there." And then their mouths will just continue.
I'll tell you what's happening. I've noticed that now that I've been watching Japanese movies, is for them to say one sentence, their words must be longer or more complex. Because I'll be done reading the subtitles and then watch the scene for like another 5 or 6 seconds while they finish saying what's at the bottom of the screen. And so it and that's what I mean. It's just so much more distracting. And then it becomes parodied, of course, because then people parody how their mouths keep moving after the dub.
Yeah, and another thing I've noticed is certain times when they do dub things rather than strictly translating it, they'll switch it to something. Because I know you've seen this movie, Kung Fu Hustle.
Yeah, a long time ago. Yep.
Yeah. Well, the landlady and her husband, they're sitting down with who eventually becomes the main villain of the movie, and in the dub version, they say something like they're the re-resurrected versions of Helen of Troy in Paris, but in the movie, the regular movie, that's not what they say at all.
Oh, it isn't.
Yeah, she has a name for herself, and he had like a cool name. Yeah, but it's like it made me wonder how many other times that I watched dub movies that they did that.
Well, I noticed that with Seven Samurai, even where there was, and it isn't heavily profane, but there was like some profanities where I was like, oh, I'm surprised that this was allowed in the 50s, like especially when they brought it to America. Well, then I found out that the version I was watching, they translated it more accurately because originally the original subtitles, they did soften them. And so what the Japanese were hearing was a little different than even the subtitles because they softened it because they knew they knew they couldn't just put straight up too much profanity at that time period. And now they went back and did a more accurate translation, which that's kind of interesting too.
Yeah.
How that can happen. So yeah, you can be kind of like duped sometimes. I think
Yeah.
something's one thing. Yeah, and that's the other thing too is I feel like sometimes the black and white too. There's this. It's not as interesting to look at because there's no color. And again, that can be. I mean, we've all seen crap black and white movies. I mean, there's plenty of B movie schlock from those time periods out there. But there is also these directors who know exactly how to move the camera, how to use the camera, and just bring you into the shots where you're not even thinking about the color anymore either, that you're just kind of engrossed in the story of it and who those people are. And so I don't know, those are all just things that I think just hold people back from they're going to Redbox and they're renting these just garbage, these garbage movies where it's like, and this isn't me being snobby, we all have our guilty pleasures. There's plenty of crap movies. If you guys listen to our super long episode where we went through our top 100 movies, I mean, I had plenty of not great movies in there that I recognize aren't like top lists of critics for those years or whatever that you just enjoy. But at the same time, don't just suffer because it's the movie that's out.
Yeah, I really feel like if you are a movie goer, you should open up your mind a little bit to older things. One of the, everyone, I think everyone that listens to our show knows me and horror movies go together like butter and lobster.
Butter and lobster, what's a good choice?
Yeah, but hands down, one of the movies that kind of creeped me out a little was Nosferatu. The original Nosferatu, which, let's be real here, it's basically just Bram Stoker's Dracula. They just change because the Bram Stoker estate was like, we're gonna come at you with our lawyers, bro.
That's how you get around copyright.
Yeah, but
it's like, no, this is Count Orloff.
But it just had this creepy atmosphere to it, and just looking at Count Orlok, it's just
Orlok, yeah, not Orloff.
Just it like kind of. Yeah, and then their use of shadows in that movie and the kind of that effect they do where you could see the characters in darkness, but they could see the eyes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's something I think that just can never be replicated in color is the moody atmosphere with shadows.
Yeah,
because that, like you said, like probably some of the most eerie shots I've ever seen are black and white because of how they can just the lighting can so drastically be changed with like the way they use shadows, because you're not in the sun, you're not worried about being surrounded by, is there too much green around you or too much yellow, and it's just like you're just kind of, and so yeah, you can almost get kind of more of a creepy atmosphere. That's what I was trying to say with black and white. Because what was that other early movie, that Cabinet of Dr.
Caligari?
Yeah, Caligari, where, man, I've seen some shots from that, and it's like, oh, God, that's just eerie. Like, the things that they were able to just do with shadow and lighting, and, yeah. And so, yeah, you're right. If you're, like, someone who's really into just spooky atmosphere things, like, and you don't watch black and white, you're missing out on quite a bit. But yeah, it's just you're also missing out on just like a lot of great just actors and roles that people played over the years, and also in this case too with Seven Samurai, just how this was like such an inspiration for so many. I mean, we've talked about Star Wars a little bit in this talk too, and just how Kurosawa was George Lucas's favorite director. In fact, Kurosawa was having trouble getting funding in the 80s to get some of his movies made, which is kind of crazy to think about, that this was the most known and famous director in Japan, but he was having trouble getting funding for movies. And George Lucas basically banded together some of his filmmaker friends to get funding for Kurosawa's movies, because George Lucas was like, this is the guy. This is the guy who inspired me to do Star Wars, and the way he even did Star Wars and things. Because, I mean, you watch Seven Samurai or you watch Yojimbo or The Hidden Fortress or any of these other Kurosawas, and then you just see how these guys act. Though, and then, of course, the way samurai hold their swords is exactly like Jedi.
Yeah.
And the robes are like samurai. And
For anyone wondering why that one Imperial officer referred to the Death Star as a fortress, that's a nod to the Hidden Fortress, which basically has these schmoes. They're just schmoes. They're not like great warriors, or they're not the son of a fallen samurai.
right.
They're just guys out here living their best life.
But there's a spunky princess. And honestly, the two comedic relief guys who some people think are annoying in that movie, I'm like, is that C-3PO and
Yes,
R2-D2?
yes.
It's gotta be, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's just, I mean, that's the thing. And again, this is where you find that line between inspiration and knockoff, and I feel like you still see how it is inspiration, because Lucas obviously just created a whole new different world with it, but took these things that he liked, the things he appreciated, and then instead of just being like, oh, I gotta make this for modern audiences, or whatever they feel like they need to do, he just kind of built his own kind of world around it in that way. So, yeah, because I mean, I think that's the sad state of Star Wars today, is that they think they're just continually enhancing this world, but they're just adding in their stupid modern day crap into it. This is just me bitter about, I don't care about any of the new Star Wars things that are happening anymore, Dakota.
If you just cut the head off the snake and don't go back to it, I found that the disappointment, the bitterness, it all goes away.
Yeah.
Like, somebody reminded me that Star Trek Discovery is still going on. And,
oh, yeah, it is, isn't it? That's crazy.
And I was like, wow, season 5 seasons of just probably pure garbage. I noped out after the second one. I was like, yeah, I'm done. Not going back.
Yeah.
And the only reason I went, growing up, Star Trek The Next Generation was one of my favorite series. So it's like, yeah, I had to be there for season 1 of Picard. Season 2 of Picard, like, the episodes started off in a way where you're like, man, I think they listened to the fans. And then it quickly nosedived into just crappy storytelling and ridiculous dialogue, dumb situations. And it's like, it should have just been like a hour and 30 minutes of a movie. It didn't need a whole season.
That's the streaming problem, isn't it?
And then
there's so many things that shouldn't have been shows but should have been movies.
Yeah, and then I was like, I'm done. I'm sick and tired of, it's like I'm in an abusive relationship. I can't do this anymore. I'm angry. I'm bitter. I'm tired of getting my hopes up that next time it'll be better. And then they knocked it out of the park with season 3, and I was like, okay, now I can let Star Wars go. Or Star Trek go. I let Star Trek go.
Yeah.
I don't care what anyone says about Lower Decks. I'm not watching another episode of Lower Decks. And Star Trek, whatever, Strange New Worlds, like, no,
Yeah.
I've just been,
And that's still going too with new seasons.
yeah, I've just, I was like, good for Anson Mount. He's continues to work,
He's
but
still getting those jobs.
I can't do it anymore. And I was like that with Marvel and Star Wars a long time ago. And I just, I noped on out after WandaVision. And then,
And you know, at this point, I have to say, I don't blame you. Because I'm kind of at a point where I'm kind of doing this kind of, we'll always have Paris. I kind of have that. That's how I am with Marvel right now, where it's like, but my we'll always have Paris is, at least I have the Infinity Saga. If you watch up through that, that's a pretty great send off. And then after that, maybe I'll pick and choose a couple things. But boy,
Yeah, I mean, it's just you gotta just pick and choose, I guess.
Yep.
You can't it's almost like brand loyalty in this. It's almost like they're testing your brand loyalty, like
That's what it
how
feels like.
how far away from the path can we go before everyone's like, I've had enough. I can't do it anymore. And I'm like that with, like I said, Marvel, Star Trek, Star Wars.
And isn't it?
But you know what? Mission Impossible movies are still good.
Those are still doing really. I don't know. They're not. The last one didn't do really well box office wise, but it's still a really good movie.
Yeah. Supposedly Keanu Reeves wants to keep doing John Wick movies, even though, that I don't know if he saw how the last one ended.
Yeah, did he miss the ending?
I've heard good things about this Fallout show on Amazon. There's other media out there to
Yeah.
consume new media.
Yep.
I mean, those of you sitting around excitedly waiting for the Acolyte, it's like, who are you?
Yeah, I don't know if that's too many people, but and I think that's what we're seeing here is here you bring up Fallout and Last of Us. Last year people really liked and the Sonic has a third movie coming out. The Mario Brothers just made over $1 billion. That it does in a way feel like video game movies are kind of taking over that comic book space, aren't they? With
Yeah, it's just
and it's crazy how all of this still, in a sense, comes back to Kurosawa. How so much of this, and this is that cyclical nature of inspiration, where it's like he was inspired by John Ford, and then westerns were inspired by Kurosawa, and then you have this little kid who's going to the theater all the time in California named George, little Georgie Lucas, who's watching all of these things and just building his own world using these ideas he's seen from Kurosawa and from these westerns and putting it there. What if I did like a crazy space western with samurai wizards, and stuff like that, and then you have just how many people now are inspired by Star Wars. And I mean, yeah, we've been talking about the goods and bads of that. But there has been, I mean, so many directors that we still really like what they do will be like, oh man, George Lucas, or a lot of, or Spielberg will be like, they're what got me into filmmaking. They're what like inspired me, and here, and really what it is, it's like it comes back to Kurosawa and John Ford. It's just like this constant, and that's what good art is, and artistic craft is like you're seeing these things, you're being inspired by it, and you're pressing forward. Don't rehash, and that's what I'm saying. That's the difference between inspiration and rehash. We're getting into this territory where a lot of things are becoming the microwaved leftovers of yesterday, where they have a little bit of that fridge flavor. They sat in that Tupperware a little too long, and it's like, no, like give us the neck, like do something you're excited about, where you're not excited about the paycheck so much, kind of push it.
It's funny. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you here.
No, I'll talk forever.
It's funny I brought up Nosferatu earlier because that's being remade.
Yes.
There's so many, I don't want to say classic horror movies, because I saw Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, and I was just like, yeah, I saw them, and I was like, you did this now with the big budget, but I don't trust Hollywood to do anything to just tell a story to entertain people.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the new Kong Godzilla movies are killing it. It's like they're just trying to entertain. They're not trying to do like Macbeth but with giant monsters.
Yeah.
They're like, hey man, hey.
And they're also not trying to put in just too much of just other crap. It's like, no, you want monsters punching? Here's monsters punching.
They gave Kong a glove, a giant
power
metal
glove.
in this. I'm all about the power glove. Or what was that line from The Wizard?
I think it's about it, yeah.
But it's just there are filmmakers out there who want to tell a good story. Unfortunately, there's not as many as I like. And then there's others who realize the movie theaters, the Coliseum, and in order to get people in there, you got to put on a good fight. You gotta, what's Maximus's great line? Are you not entertained?
Yeah. Which that'd be James Cameron. I feel like that guy is a P.T. Barnum in a filmmaker's clothes.
It's unfortunate though because I feel like Lucas became that. The prequels are just
he did a little bit. I think those prequels are a case of too many yes people in the room because they were just excited he was back and forgot to rein him in, like we've talked about with other filmmakers.
I watched the Attack of the Clones with the commentary on, and it's
is it just him?
No, it's a few people, but was it Ralph? No, not Ralph McQuarrie. One of the producers on the movie is like, "Oh man, doesn't this look beautiful?" George came up with this.
Yeah, and I know it's that producer that worked on those prequels with him, and he was such a Lucas hype man, and I think he just said yes to everything. He was one of the problems.
I think when he got shown the pitch meeting for General Grievous, he probably fainted from excitement.
he had that Vince McMahon moment. He just fell back in the chair.
Yeah, it's just there are still good filmmakers out there though. There's still people trying to entertain, trying to tell good stories. So.
No, and again, that's why that's one of the big things that's cool about these Dune movies, even though it's an old book, it's someone adapting it, making it work because he's not following the book to a T either.
Yeah.
And he's kind of building out this world, and he's also taking something that could have been very generic Star Warsy because Star Wars ripped off from Dune also.
Yeah.
And made it something new and fresh and cool and didn't use $400 million to do it. And so and that's the thing. It's like, is Denis Villeneuve the new Peter Jackson? Not quite, because he's been kind of building his career over time.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of interested to see who that next Peter Jackson will be, where he'll just come out of nowhere. In one sense, Peter Jackson had made a few kind of things through the 90s, but then all of a sudden is like, you know what? I'm just going to stay in New Zealand. I'm going to put together these people that I trust, that I know, and we're going to make 3 huge epic movies.
You know what we should do? We should sit down and make a list of directors that Hollywood ruined.
and that's the thing. It's like, and then I still think he's got something in him. But I think it's hard for him because he knows Hollywood will just take him. And so it's tough. And so, but again, we're kind of all over the place in this, but I think it's because Kurosawa, you may have never heard of him until we're talking about him right now, but he really is in a lot of ways one of the grandfathers of just a lot of the movie making we're seeing today, and is real influential. I mean, even sometimes when you're reading comic books, you're seeing Kurosawa's influence in just how they're doing things. And so give him a chance. And if 3.5 hours feels too daunting, watch it in a couple parts. I mean, it doesn't hurt it. I did that. I had to do that because I just watched it at times when I was holding my little baby, and you get right back into it and get going. And then again, this is one of his longer ones. He has shorter ones too, where they're even like more in that 90-minute range, where they're not even 2 hours. And but yeah, I would just encourage you to check it out. And the other thing we hope you check out is we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we're on all those places. Maybe that's where you listen, is on YouTube. But we hope you subscribe, we hope you like, we hope you rate us in those places where you listen. Sharing these things out with friends, just to kind of build more people that are checking us out as we just continue to talk about movies, because we love to do that. And so I think with that, we'll end this episode. So this is Steven.
This is Dakota.
See you later.